For over a decade, the whispers of the Blackwood Forest had carried a chilling tale, a story of two brothers who vanished into its ancient, indifferent embrace, leaving behind a profound and agonizing void that had consumed their family soul. The forest itself, a silent monument to their inexplicable loss, became synonymous with the haunting question of their fate. 10 long years after their disappearance, a figure, gaunt and spectral, emerged from the impenetrable foliage. He was a ghost from a forgotten past, bearing not just the deep, wrenching physical scars of relentless survival, but a secret so profound, so utterly shattering, that it promised to obliterate every assumption and whisper surrounding that fateful hunting trip. This was no mere return. It was a devastating resurrection, burdened with a truth far more terrifying than the quiet, final certainty of death itself. The year was 2008. The atmosphere in the small, tightly knit town of Oakhaven still held the lazy, golden warmth of a waning late September afternoon. For the Miller family, this was a season of comfort and routine. Ethan, the older brother at 22, was the quiet, dependable anchor, his hands calloused from his years in the family carpentry business. Jacob, 18, was a stark contrast, a whirlwind of restless, effervescent energy whose enthusiasm for the wilderness was a defining trait. Hunting in the Blackwood, a sprawling, untamed expanse of ancient oaks, towering pines, and treacherous ravines, was more than tradition. It was the sacred ritual that defined their bond. This trip, in particular, was weighted with significance. Jacob's celebratory send-off before he left home for his post-graduation journey. Sarah, their mother, packed their gear and provisions with her usual meticulous, almost ritualistic care, her love a palpable warmth, yet layered with the intensifying maternal anxiety that inevitably accompanies a farewell. Thomas, their father, a man whose emotions ran deep beneath a stoic facade, offered a final, resonant plea as he clapped each boy on the shoulder. "Stay safe, boys. Stick together." They drove away in the familiar, battered pickup, its tires spitting gravel onto the driveway. The final image Sarah held, Jacob's exuberant, carefree wave and Ethan's final, profoundly reassuring nod, was immediately captured by her memory, destined to become a relentless, tormenting phantom, a source of both hope and profound anguish for the next decade. The silence that fell over the house once the engine noise faded was heavy, an ominous, unheeded premonition. The initial reports were utterly devoid of the drama that would later engulf the family. Two experienced woodsmen, a routine weekend trip, expected back by Sunday evening. When Monday morning arrived, cold and overcast, and their truck remained conspicuously absent, the first cold current of dread began to spread. By Monday afternoon, that current had solidified into paralyzing fear. Thomas, his face a roadmap of worry, reported them missing to Sheriff Brody, a local lawman who had watched the Miller boys grow up. Brody immediately launched a limited, localized search, his professional experience telling him the Blackwood was capable of swallowing the most seasoned explorer. But two men vanishing without a single trace? That was deeply unsettling, bordering on the impossible. Initial search efforts meticulously covered their known routes and frequented camping spots, but the weather quickly became the first, unforgiving antagonist. A torrential, prolonged downpour descended, transforming the forest floor into a slick, muddy, treacherous labyrinth and swiftly washing away any potential footprints, tire tracks, or faint signs of their passage. Temperatures plummeted, introducing a chilling, new layer of mortal urgency to the search. Hope, a finite and fragile commodity, began to wither with each passing, silent hour. Sarah became a wraith in her own home, pacing by the front window, her eyes permanently scanning the road, consumed by a searing, silent terror that allowed for no rest. Thomas, his usually decisive carpenter's hands trembling with a devastating helplessness, watched the agonizing process unfold. Days bled into weeks, and those weeks stretched into months. The massive search, which eventually incorporated specialized tracking teams, cadaver dogs, and even advanced thermal imaging helicopters yielded absolutely nothing. Not a discarded backpack, not a footprint, not the slightest, most insignificant trace of their existence. It was as if the brothers had simply been erased instantaneously and completely absorbed into the very fabric of the wilderness. Brody's official conclusion, delivered with a grave and palpable sadness, was the only one logic permitted. The brothers had almost certainly become disoriented in the sudden storm, succumbed to the unforgiving elements, and their bodies were irrevocably lost to the trackless vastness of the Blackwood. It was a conclusion that offered no solace, no definitive end, only a cruel, agonizing limbo. For Sarah and Thomas, time had simply stopped. Their lives became a desperate, protracted vigil, their unwavering hope defying every piece of logic and evidence, preventing them from ever fully mourning, preventing them from ever truly living again. 10 years. A full decade had spun past since the Miller brothers vanished. The natural cycle of the seasons had repeated 10 times over, but the agonizing void they left behind remained a constant, gaping wound. Sarah and Thomas had visibly aged beyond their years, their movements slow and heavy, their faces permanently etched with the lines of ingrained, cumulative grief. The town of Oakhaven had long since ceded to the grim reality, holding a somber memorial service where empty caskets represented the unrecovered. Yet, a sliver of irrational, burning hope kept the Millers tethered to their pain. Then, on a crisp, bright October morning, the decade of suffocating silence was spectacularly shattered. A solitary hiker, traversing a seldom used, overgrown trail deep within the Blackwood, stumbled upon a sight that immediately triggered a primal, horrified scream into the stillness. Huddled against the enormous, gnarled base of an ancient oak, utterly gaunt, filthy, and disheveled, barely clinging to the precipice of life, was a man. He spoke no coherent words, only emitted a low, continuous, guttural cry, the sound of profound, endured terror. He was identified through a faded, intricate tattoo, a small compass design that both brothers had proudly acquired years ago. This emaciated, traumatized figure was, impossibly, Ethan Miller. The news detonated in Oakhaven like a physical shockwave, an overwhelming mixture of exhilarating relief, stunned disbelief, and a profound, cold apprehension that immediately centered on the missing brother. Ethan was alive. But where was Jacob? And what unimaginable, unspeakable story of horror had Ethan carried locked within his mind for 10 years? Sheriff Brody rushed to the hospital, his professional sense of duty battling with his personal, surging hope. Sarah and Thomas arrived soon after, their faces a devastating canvas of raw, conflicting emotions, their relief battling a paralyzing fear for Jacob. Initially, Ethan was completely catatonic, his body severely malnourished, his mind a shattered, impenetrable landscape of suppressed memory and profound trauma. He flinched violently from any human touch, his eyes constantly darting, searching the sterile room for an unseen, expected threat. Weeks passed slowly, painstakingly, with a gentle, persistent intervention of specialists. Ethan began the slow process of physical and mental stabilization. His voice, when it finally returned, was a harsh, rasping whisper. He recounted the first few days of the trip as a golden memory, but detailed how, on the third day, a heavy, disorienting fog rolled in as they pursued game deep into uncharted forest. They were rapidly and completely lost, their compass rendered useless by the strange atmospheric conditions. Fear, cold and insidious, had settled deep into their bones. On the fifth night, the tempest struck, and through the raging wind and rain, they heard it, a rhythmic thudding, a heavy, metallic clang, the distinct sound of something impossibly large, something unnatural, moving through the dense undergrowth. They huddled, paralyzed with terror. The next morning, the storm had moved on. Their campsite was obliterated, and massive, deeply impressed tracks, too large, too evenly spaced, too terrifyingly deliberate for any known creature, marred the soft earth. Ethan paused, his gaze fixing on his parents, the light of 10 years of pure terror burning in his eyes. He delivered the staggering truth, his voice barely a coherent whisper. It wasn't an accident. We weren't lost. We were taken. The word taken resonated in the confines of the hospital room, solidifying the miller's deepest, most irrational terrors. Brody, his rational mind reeling, pressed Ethan for the necessary, terrifying details. Ethan described the harrowing, final moment of the abduction days later. Exhausted, injured, and demoralized, they rested by a small, rocky stream. The oppressive forest stillness was violently shattered by a sudden, deep, guttural roar that seemed to vibrate through the very structure of the world. Something immense, shadowy, and impossibly fast burst from the tree-line. Ethan's fragmented description was saturated with primal horror, a blur of dark, thick fur, enormous, powerful limbs, and eyes that glowed with an unnatural, chilling, predatory intelligence. Jacob, ever the protector despite his younger age, instinctively raised his rifle. Ethan remembered the muzzle flash, the deafening, useless report, and then Jacob's choked cry as the creature seized him and vanished into the impenetrable, indifferent growth. Ethan himself was violently thrown, his head striking a tree with a sickening thud, and his world dissolved into a spinning, agonizing blackness. When he awoke, Jacob was gone. The creature was gone. The forest was cloaked in a new, profound, and menacing silence. Alone, consumed by injury and a crippling, absolute guilt, Ethan survived. He became a self-imposed phantom, living on the sheer, ragged edge of existence, his mind fractured by starvation and trauma, yet driven by the relentless, burning need to survive and a desperate, unyielding hope for his brother's fate. He recounted 2 impossible discoveries that became his anchors to reality. A strange, rusted metallic object, intricately designed with flowing, complex alien symbols and a faint, internal hum, hidden deep in a stream bed, and an ancient arrowhead, crudely fashioned and unervingly out of place, found embedded in the thick bark of the cedar tree directly above where Jacob was taken. Both were tangible, undeniable fragments of the impossible, clues to a horror that lay far outside the bounds of their known world. Brody, a man whose entire career was predicated on the tangible and the rational, felt his professional reality dissolving. Ethan's narrative, though utterly fantastical, possessed a raw, unshakable consistency and conviction, evidenced by the deep, physical trauma etched into his very being. The presence of the metallic object, if it truly existed, was the key, the single, objective piece of evidence that could transform a survivor's delusion into a terrifying, universal truth. The very next day, Brody assembled a small, highly trained team, equipped with the best tracking technology available. Ethan, despite his ongoing frailty, insisted on guiding them, his desperation lending him an almost supernatural accuracy in navigating the dense wilderness. They followed him unerringly, pushing deeper into the most remote, rarely traversed recesses of the Blackwood, toward the notoriously isolated and forbidding ridge known as Widow's Peak, a place steeped in local legends of unsettling phenomena. With every arduous, sweat-soaked step, the collective tension of the team grew. The shadows seemed deeper, the silence more charged with unspoken threat. After hours of difficult trekking, they reached the clearing Ethan described. And there, against the base of the massive, ancient cedar, exactly as he described, was the arrowhead, its rusted tip glinting faintly in the dim light. And hidden beneath a small, deliberate pile of stones was the metallic object. Its smooth, cold surface shimmered with an internal light, the strange, alien symbols pulsing faintly. It was real. The impossible was real. The discovery sent a visceral, collective shockwave through the small, hardened team, forcing them to confront a terrifying new reality. As the artifact pulsed faintly in Brody's gloved hand, Its low hum almost auditory, Ethan urged them onward, his voice choked with decade-old pain. Jacob was here. I know it. Tucked away beneath a dense, thorny thicket, almost completely concealed by years of detritus. They found it. A small, partially collapsed structure, crudely built from large, flat stones and gnarled branches. A wave of profound, cold air and a faint, metallic, and unnervingly sweet odor emanated from a narrow opening in the base. This was no animal den, no simple natural shelter. This was a deliberate, hidden entrance to something else entirely. With the sense of immediate, overwhelming urgency now paramount, Brody ordered a small, armed team to cautiously enter. Flashlights sliced through the oppressive, tomb-like darkness as Ethan, compelled by a force beyond exhaustion, led the way. The air grew perceptibly colder, heavier, with each step down the narrow, descending passage. The stone walls were unnervingly smooth, almost polished, etched with angular symbols that exactly matched those on the artifact, glowing faintly with the same internal, pulsing light. After a disorienting, seemingly endless descent, the passage opened into a vast, cavernous chamber. Its ceiling was lost in the oppressive darkness, but the space was illuminated by an intricate network of pulsating, organic-looking lights embedded into the walls and ceiling. In the exact center of this alien vault, a vision of profound, chilling scientific terror materialized. Jacob Miller, encased entirely in a transparent, crystalline sarcophagus that vibrated with a low, continuous, almost inaudible energy. His body was unnaturally preserved, pale, and nearly translucent, his eyes closed as if in a profound, peaceful slumber. Yet, beneath his skin, faint, glowing, intricate patterns, the same alien symbols, traced his vascular network, pulsing rhythmically with the chamber's strange light. He was suspended, connected by a network of thin, luminous tendrils to a complex array of humming, otherworldly machinery. The sheer, impossible reality of the scene stole their breath. Ethan let out a visceral, agonizing cry, rushing towards the sarcophagus, his reflection distorted by the cold, unyielding crystalline surface. Jacob was undeniably alive, but held in a state of terrifying, technologically induced stasis. The chamber was not empty. Arranged in a chilling semicircle around Jacob's sarcophagus were several smaller crystalline pods, which contained the skeletal remains of non-human beings, forms that were elongated, with strangely shaped skulls and spindly limbs. These were the architects, the final, dying representatives of an ancient, alien civilization who had made the Blackwood their clandestine, subterranean home. The truth of Jacob's decade-long disappearance, revealed in this hidden, impossible vault, was far more shocking and universal than any simple human tragedy. It was a cosmic abduction, a terrifying piece of scientific manipulation, and a glimpse into an incomprehensible alien reality that had been unfolding beneath their feet for generations. The discovery of the subterranean chamber, the preserved Jacob, and the physical evidence of an alien presence immediately catapulted the crisis to the highest levels of national security. The site was instantly designated a top-secret zone, its existence vehemently denied and perpetually concealed from the public. Scientists, linguists, military analysts, and bioethicists swarmed the Blackwood, a silent, shadowy army tasked with the impossible mission of unraveling the chamber secrets. Ethan became the invaluable, living key, his fragmented memories painstakingly cataloged and analyzed by trauma specialists. The metallic object, now confirmed as a sophisticated, multifunctional alien communication and data storage device, dubbed the Whisper, was the most critical piece of evidence. Its continuous, low-frequency transmission and its dense internal data were slowly, laboriously translated and deciphered. The alien race, referred to in their own archives as the Aethel, the Ancient Ones or Noble Ones, were revealed to be a dying, once star-faring civilization facing the terminal stages of genetic degradation. Earth, with its rich, vibrant, and resilient genetic pool, represented their final, desperate hope. The Blackwood facility was revealed to be a meticulously designed, clandestine research outpost, one of several across the globe, established for a desperate, final process they called transfer, the intricate, symbiotic fusion of their dying, yet highly advanced, consciousness into a new, healthy human host body. Jacob, the Aethel logs explicitly detailed, was not a random victim, but a specifically chosen candidate, his rare genetic markers deemed ideally compatible. The sarcophagus was an exceptionally complex bioreactor, gradually preparing his body and neural networks for the delicate, profound process of genetic and consciousness fusion. The glowing symbols on his skin and the luminous tendrils were not markings of imprisonment, but signs of the slow, decade-long biological adaptation for the upcoming assimilation. The other pods contained the remains of those Aethel who had succumbed to their terminal condition. The creature Ethan had seen was one of the last remaining, biologically decaying Aethel, acting as the final, desperate guardian of the facility. The Aethel's ultimate goal was not malice or domination, but simply continuity, a desperate bid for the survival of their civilization within a new, combined being. The profound emotional tragedy of the two brothers had expanded into a terrifying cosmic drama. The ethical stakes were overwhelming. The scientific community and government officials grappled with the moral implications. Did humanity have the right to interfere with a dying, advanced species' final, desperate attempt at survival? The scientific data confirmed the transfer process had been underway for a decade. Any clumsy, abrupt attempt to halt or reverse it could prove instantly fatal to Jacob or leave him irreparably brain-damaged. The technology was too complex, the biological changes too intricately interwoven with Jacob's very being. Ethan's initial, overwhelming relief at finding his brother alive was now overshadowed by a profound, cold horror and a desperate, burning urgency. He remained a constant, unwavering presence by the sarcophagus, refusing to leave, channeling all his remaining strength into the belief that his voice, his presence, could somehow breach the alien stasis and retrieve his brother. The Aethel logs, while detailing their science, also revealed their deep, almost melancholy regret at the necessity of this action, underscoring their belief that this was their only, terrible path to avoid absolute oblivion. The Blackwood facility, once a terrifying local legend, had transformed into a crucible of cosmic science and profound ethical debate. Jacob's slow, steady heartbeat within the crystalline shell remained the constant, silent focus, a metronome ticking down to a fate that was unknown and terrifying. His survival and transformation represented not just the Miller family's tragedy, but a cosmic revelation, forcing humanity to confront its own vulnerability and the terrifying, awesome realities of life far beyond Earth. The true secret of the Blackwood was a silent, desperate narrative of two species tragically colliding, a profound and agonizing choice that would ultimately determine the fate of Jacob Miller and the future legacy of the Ancient Ones.